you saw the very best players the entire country has to offer, and you saw it throughout the course of the weekend.
He's growing, he's improving at such a rapid rate. He's going to be a very good player.
This guy's a cross between Sean Marion and Lamar Odom. He's a 6'8" lefty, a high-level athlete, but also got a little bit of point-forward skills in him as he can handle and pass the ball extremely well. At this point, they are simply the standard by which everyone else is judged in prep school basketball. He's considering the likes of Michigan, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas.
Welcome back to the Upside Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and this week I am very excited to have Rachel Baker on the show. Now, if you've listened to this podcast or you followed me on social media for a while, you know that I often try and push back on a lot of the BS, quite frankly, or the kind of the false narratives that surround the grassroots basketball community on social media or in some of these gyms. And part of that is, you see things, people who have influence, people who have quote unquote power in this world. Well, today we have one of those people, one of the most influential people that I know. And I'm going to guess that if you are a casual basketball fan, you haven't heard the name Rachel Baker. But she is, as I said, as influential a person I know in the grassroots basketball industry. So without further ado, Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I think you oversold it a little bit, but I appreciate the kind words.
Well, it's we're gonna keep going with that theme. So I wanted to start with a story, and I have never told you this story. I've told colleagues of yours this, but when did you start at Nike? How long ago was that?
You're aging me. My first intern summer was the summer of 2010.
Okay,
so 11 years ago.
Yeah, I thought it was about that. So I just turned 40, so don't. Yeah. So it was around that time. I was guessing it was 8 to 10 years ago. And I am downstairs at the Peach Jam. And for those who don't know, the Peach Jam is the biggest grassroots basketball event of the year, Nike's flagship event. And it can be very crowded downstairs because you've got Nike people, you've got teams, you've got players, you've got later in the week, if we've got TV stuff, you've got us down there, which is why I was down there. So I was down there walking coincidentally behind you and behind a prominent grassroots director. And this is a person who and I'm not going to say a name, but many people would know this name, and he commands a lot of respect in the basketball world, coast to coast. And I'm guessing you're in your early 20s. This was my first experience. I hadn't met you before, but this guy is literally walking behind you and saying, "You said you were going to send me this product," and kind of animated as it was, you wheel around like complete 180 and say, "I told you I got you, and I got you." And I was like, and now fast forward an hour later. I go and sit down in an ESPN production meeting, getting ready for a national TV broadcast on Sunday. This is Saturday night at about 11:30. And in walks this same person who I just saw hold court downstairs. And she then begins to hold court in the production meeting. And I look at, so I text a colleague of yours and I said, "I don't know who this person is, but I know you're going to end up working for her sooner or later." So that was very literally my first introduction to Rachel Baker, and it has always stuck with me through the years. I think it was about 10 years ago, but I did want to start. I won't dominate this interview, but I did want to start with that story because it has always resonated with me. I was like, wow, this person is a star. So
thank you. I guess it's funny because I could have had that same director conversation at some point yesterday. So you never know the timing. Not a ton has changed, but
yeah.
But I do remember that. I do remember those late night production meetings. Those are always fun. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I must say, as you explained the basement in Augusta, the scent of being in the basement of Augusta immediately flew back to me. That's probably the most prominent part of the building. So
no doubt, I'm ready for the peaches right now. Let's go. So I wanted to start at the very beginning because you, at the time you came in, you were a young lady doing unprecedented things in what had historically been a man's world, for lack of a much better description. And you were really kind of a pioneer and a trendsetter. So I wanted to kind of
you.
dive in and see how that happened. Is this something, where you're at now, is this something that you aspired to be, or did this just kind of happen organically?
I didn't even know this existed. I didn't
Mm,
even know that um, I knew about high school basketball. I didn't know that the EYBL existed in the way that it did. I certainly didn't know that Peach Jam existed. I tell the story sometimes about when I first started at Nike. I was kind of understanding everything that we did, and we had these big events in Vegas and in Chicago, and then I heard about this event in North Augusta, South Carolina, in some gym that I had to drive 2 hours from Atlanta to get to. And I was like, well, we'll check this out, but like this can't stick. We need to evolve. We need to be different. Like we have to catch up with the times. And then I went into my first Peach Jam, and I was like, oh, okay, like that's what this is. I
right,
get it now.
right,
So I
right.
certainly didn't know about any of this, and I didn't know that I didn't know any other women that worked in the space either. I growing up around basketball, my dad was a college basketball coach, and I didn't see the women were either on television or athletic trainers. I just
Mm,
didn't meet women that worked around basketball, so I wasn't sure exactly. Um, I knew that I wanted to be close to sports, and I thought the only way to do it was to be on TV. So I was a mass communication major, and I
oh, I
was
didn't know that.
hoping that so I was hoping some small TV station in Philadelphia might give me a chance, but I had no idea that I would fall into this world.
That puts the production meeting in, that gives some context to the production meeting.
That's a good point. I never really thought about that, but yes, yeah.
So you mentioned you were so how did you get that first Nike internship? You kind of went in not with any preconceived notions that it could lead to something like this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I got very lucky. My first Nike internship, my dad has been coaching at the what was then our skills academies for
Mm,
probably 10 years before I even thought about it.
yep.
And maybe about a week before, at the time, we had an Amari Stoudemire and Darren Williams skills academy in Chicago, and there was an administrative like intern role that someone had very last minute been unable to fill, and I think my dad had mentioned before that I was in the interning age, and the person that kind of ran the events at the time asked if I could come out to Chicago and help out.
Mm,
And when I say like administration, maybe even overselling what I did, I was like booking flights and making sure people got in the right hotel rooms and the buses left on time.
yeah.
So definitely not to be sold short. It's a very important part of all the work that we do. But that was my first experience at Nike. But I'd heard about my dad going to these camps my whole life, so it would always be like, "Do you want anything from the?" I think he probably called it the camp store, the employee store, and I pictured him at this like table where he was like picking out T-shirts in my sizes. I never knew that there was a Beaverton, Oregon, with this tens of thousands of people working at this company called Nike. So I never put all of that together. So the first time I went to this basketball camp that my dad always worked at, that I would compare to in my mind to like a college camp or a high school basketball camp, my mind was blown. I had never seen anything like it. Not only what was happening from like an operations perspective, what we did in terms of the camp, the food, the rooms. I was 20 years old and I had my own hotel room. I didn't know what to do with that, like all of those things. But then also what was going on court. I still am shocked sometimes by the level of talent that we see just in a throwaway game at the beginning of an EYBL season. So being at one of those skills academies and seeing these high schoolers and college players that just like absolutely killing. This is so embarrassing, but one of the first inter squad scrimmages or something I was working at, I clapped for something, like someone did something and I clapped. In my if looks could kill, and I was like, don't you ever do that again. So I learned quick the do's and don'ts of grassroots basketball.
That's
Um,
funny.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that's even worse, by the way, when you're like a national evaluator. I fortunately have never done it, but we had a colleague once who did it and who started yelling at the refs, and we were just like, can't do that.
Can't do
Can't.
that. Can't do
Um,
that.
Now you mentioned your dad. Your dad, I've never met your dad, but I know of your dad. Rod Baker, is that correct?
That's him. Yep.
And so he's a longtime coach. So if you wouldn't mind, tell me about growing up a coach's daughter, because I tend to drop stories here, but I remember one day, this was an EYBL session a few years ago, and I was skipping out early on a Sunday afternoon, and because it was my son's like third birthday or something, and I was determined to get home. Actually, you guys have the same birthday.
Really?
May 14th, I think, right?
I have spent a lot of birthdays in high school in gyms. Yeah.
Okay, so this is exactly why because this is why we struck up the conversation. I said, I'm missing the last 2 games. I got to get home to see my son before his birthday. And I remember you said that today's my birthday too. So, but you made like a comment about, like, I grew up with my dad always on the road. So talk to me about what your dad's career, what that was like, and what it was like for you, your mom, and how that may have shaped where you are now.
For sure. So it's really interesting. I thought about this for the first time somewhat recently. My parents met, and their first few, when my dad was really young and in the coaching world, and really just kind of getting his feet wet in a few different opportunities. And they spent some of their first few dates with my mom in the passenger seat with a paper map, like directing my dad around the country as he was doing different scouting and recruiting. So to think about the fact that now every single day I'm trying to create a space that is more efficient for coaches, media, athletes, families. It's crazy to think about the kind of 360 moment that landed me here, but that's definitely was what it was. Our lives revolved around basketball and my dad's career. I was born in Jersey when he was at Seton Hall. And then before I turned 1, we moved to California for 6 years. He was at UCI, and it took me a while to realize that there were games being played. I wasn't just like at some fun thing with my friends where we'd chase the anteater around. And I think my brother destroyed that costume 1 or 2 times, but and then we spent some time at Cincinnati. My dad was an assistant with Bob Huggins, and I used to fake sick all the time. There's nothing more fun than sitting in a practice, and I learned a word or 2 under Coach Huggins' tutelage. So that was a good time.
I gotta interject there, because this is another thing I didn't know. What years were you with Hugs?
Oh, 96 to 99-ish, I'm guessing.
Was
probably
Larry there? Larry Harrison?
I think so. Kenyon Martin graduated the year after we left.
Yeah. Okay. So I think because I worked for Larry Harrison, who was Hugs's associate head coach in Cincinnati, and it is again now at West Virginia. When I was coaching, it was at Hartford working for Larry. So Hugs has been on the podcast.
The absolute best.
I didn't mean to interject, but I had no idea of that connection.
Yeah, the smallest basketball world. So then after Cincinnati, we went to back to Jersey. My dad was at Rutgers for a year, and that was his last college coaching job. And he moved around a bit, working in different minor league teams. And that's when my mom was kind of like, "Hey, I need my children to have like some semblance of normalcy, so we're going to stay in Jersey." So I was able to, my brother and my mom and I stayed in Jersey for high school until I went to college. But it was crazy. Like the high, it's all I knew. So it wasn't, but the highs and lows of wins and losses and moves, and it just was our life. So I think it's really helped with what's expected of me and my role now, and the time that goes into that as well.
I would also imagine it helps with your ability to connect not just with players, but with family members of players. I'm sure that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I didn't even notice how much of it was in me until you try and do it, until you try and relate to someone, to a kid, to a family, to a coach, to a whomever it might be. So it was, we were, there's actually a year that my dad and I were talking about recently when my mom was working on a television show in California. So when we first moved to Cincinnati, it was just mom, dad, or my brother, myself, and my dad. So we'd have managers picking us up from school. It was like all hands on deck. So we were really raised in the basketball community.
Yep. So, and your mom was not in the sports world, right?
Mm-mm, mm-mm. She
Gotcha.
loves it. She watches games with me now still, but she's a stylist. She works in fashion.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's all starting to make sense now.
I'm half and
Um,
half.
yeah. So now let me ask you this, and I know this is probably a question that doesn't have a short answer, but I did not give your title at the beginning of this interview because, candidly, I don't know it. I asked, and when I asked a colleague of yours, when I said, "Do you think there's any way Rachel would ever do the podcast?" And I was told, "I doubt it, but I'll ask." And then the follow-up question was, "What is her title even anyway?" And he said, "I don't know, but I know she runs shit." So this is, so again, same person, by the way, who I told 10 years ago he was going to end up working for you. But
He doesn't.
so how would you describe, because again, most of my viewers do not have the same level of context or information about the basketball world, certainly the grassroots world. So to someone with zero context, how would you describe, or how do you describe what you do on a daily basis?
I'm really bad at it, let me tell you.
Yeah.
It's hard, and it changes every day. Since October, I've been working on the Nike side on Kevin Durant's business, so completely stretching it into a different
Oh, wow.
space than I have ever worked on before. But when it comes to my EYBL work, I'll take a step back, I guess. So as I said, when I started in this, like I didn't know a ton. Like I knew just enough about basketball and the world of basketball, and then also kind of culture and marketing, just enough to be dangerous. So I asked a ton of questions just about why we did things, if we could do things differently, how we could. We didn't really have a Twitter at the time. Instagram was just getting
Mm,
popular. You probably saw me at some point, maybe before that production meeting, standing on bleacher somewhere trying to get a good shot for our Twitter. Like it was literally all hands on deck.
yeah.
And I think what it really transitioned, what that role transitioned into, as not only the EYBL has changed, but the grassroots world has changed. The expectation of not only the league, but our athletes and what we can do to arm them with the resources that they need to contribute and evolve in that space. And that's where I've filled in. I would say that anything that's not basketball related, I've hoped to have had a role in or had my hands on, but it's really more so just looking at our event strategy, our approach to how we're engaging with our athletes and our families, and how we're still servicing the priorities of Nike. So when you look at our brand, what products we're launching and opportunities connect that on the events that we're doing and on the EYBL side. And that's really kind of where I've filled in the gaps with some guardians of the game, as I like to call all the men that
Mm,
I work with, that have really been the gatekeepers to what's going on the court and everything else that they get. I try and take care of the other stuff so they can be all in on what we need from a really on court development perspective.
mm. But the role, I would imagine, has evolved over the years, and this is your
Yeah.
second stint, right? I mean, did
Yeah.
you left at one point and then
Yeah.
came back? Is that right?
Yeah, I took a sabbatical. I went to the NBA. I call it my Nike sabbatical, where I wore a few different hats there as well, but always filling these like innovation and strategy roles and trying to solve problems. Looking at whatever I did a stint with the WNBA while I was in the league office, and then also in basketball operations, leading a team that stood up our all the flagship NBA events. So All Star and NBA Combine were the two that I worked on, and then an opportunity came up to come back to Nike, and it was the perfect combination of all of the things that I like to do in my previous role and some
Mm,
new opportunities on our pro side to really kind of expand upon the marketing relationships and innovation things that I really enjoy working on.
mm. Very
So I like
cool.
my second stint. I guess I like them both, but my second stint's been a little bit more fun than the first. There's a lot of grunt work in the first stint.
Gotcha. So now let me ask you this then what is, I mean, what's next for Rachel Baker? Do you have aspirations to, do continue to, I'm sure everybody likes to continue to grow and continue to take on new challenges, but is that, I mean, you had said this is not even a world you knew existed. And I'm sure you're seeing worlds that 99.9% of people still don't, myself included, probably still don't know exist. So what really, what piques your interest moving forward as you start to think about your future?
I think the basketball, well, the basketball today doesn't look all that, I would say, off the court. The world off the court of the basketball doesn't look all that similar to what it looked like 10 years from now. And I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see changes that completely supersede what we even saw previously. I think there's going to be a ton of opportunities, and just the players are holding all of us at a higher standard. They're holding the media that they engage with, the agents they sign, the brands they sign with, the teams they go to a higher standard. And I think the future of all of those roles are hybrid roles. So I think teams are going to have to start looking at what they're offering their athletes to stay competitive. So whether it is media and branding resources, or help with their on the purpose and philanthropy, and then even agents, like, athletes don't need someone just to negotiate a contract. They want you to be able to help them develop what they want to do off the court. They're producers and musicians and fashion icons and all of these things. And for someone like me who's worn a bunch of different hats, I think that there's going to be a few different opportunities or directions I can go in. But I think I definitely see myself connected to basketball. I think that our athletes, our men and women, are in such a unique position to be at the center of not only their sport, but media and social justice and culture and everything that I'm really driven by. And I think that basketball is and all of that is very unique to basketball and basketball athletes. So it'll definitely be something connected to the sport. I just don't know what yet.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm sure it's going to evolve. You mentioned different social justice initiatives, and we also touched upon you being a pioneer in terms of coming into this again, for lack of a better term, what was previously a man's world. Are you aware? And I'm going to add this. This is a lighter side comment. We used to. I know you probably don't go to any other circuits. It's probably just strictly Nike. But there was a point there.
I snuck in once.
Did you get thrown out?
Once. No, they didn't recognize me.
Wow. Now, did you wear non-Nikes? That is the biggest
Absolutely
question.
not. Absolutely not.
So did you happen to notice, because I noticed this was about 5 years ago, and actually a colleague of mine, because you get to know the event staff at different companies, and I said, oh, who's that? I don't recognize her. I don't think I met her yet. And a colleague of mine said, I don't know her name, but I know they're trying to make her their Rachel. And I was like, what? And I was so but I really do think that you were, the tipping point of what has become a growing and obviously impactful trend. And so in terms of incorporating more women into the grassroots business, even on the boys' side, and seeing the value that not just yourself but others after you have brought, but I'm not aware of anyone, and maybe this is my own naivete, but I'm not aware of anyone who did it before you. And I think just on the surface, it seemed like other people were starting to play copycat a few years ago. So I wanted to, I know that's not even really a question, but I did want to ask you about the, that impact and the kind of just the opportunity to or the ability to make other opportunities for other young women trying to get into this space.
I think that's what continues to motivate me. I certainly was not supposed to be there. On a longer podcast, we can talk about all the reasons why they told me it wasn't the job for me when I first started to apply for a full-time position, and all of the ways I was going to mess up and
Okay, wait,
how
wait,
it
wait,
would.
wait. I can't let it go. They didn't even realize like what you had to like continue to sell yourself. Initially there was some pushback. They didn't
Oh
think
my
that like
gosh.
one.
Carlton DeBose, my dearest friend and my boss, he um he saw what I could bring to the table, and he totally went to bat for me. And they were like, all right, when this blows up, it's your fault. And it was not a space created for 22-year-old women. And I
Right.
can't say that it would have worked out the way it did if I hadn't grown up around the game. If my dad wasn't at all of the events, if I didn't like it
Yeah.
changes things and how I interact. And I hope that I've been able to let these, not only the children that I work with, the 15, 16, 17-year olds, but also the grown men that did not know how to interact and engage with women in this space, and to quite honestly take us seriously in a lot of ways.
Mm.
So I think it's been, yeah, and I think that's why I take a lot of pride in the work that I do, the space that I'm in, hoping to open more doors for the next set of women, because it's a completely different perspective that we're able to bring in working in this space, how we deal with athletes, how we deal with families, the relationship that I have. That's what I always say. And even on the pro side, like, I'm here to help build and grow your business. I'm here to help you become a better athlete, to give you the resources to be able to provide for your family when you get to the next level. We probably don't listen to the same music. I don't want to talk to you about girls. I mean, I don't play video games. Like, there's no friendship there.
Right.
And I think that really in these, a lot of these boys in the grassroots space, like, lines are so blurred between friends and mentors and
Yeah.
coaches, and it completely stunts
Especially
their
on the
ability
media
to grow.
side. Especially it's nauseating on the media side how that's like everybody's angle. Like let me tell these kids what they want to hear and trying to
Yeah.
develop a relationship. And I'm sure it's probably I never even considered the implications on your side.
Yeah. And so it's I, in my first conversation, I make it be known the role or the hope I have to play in a family's experience, an athlete's experience. And if that's something they want to take advantage of, I'm here, I'm open. I have some of my still best friends in the world I met as parents or mothers or sisters or siblings to some of these athletes. And that means that the conversations that I'm having are about, like, serious things. It's either from a business of the game perspective, or just about life. And I think that mutual respect is a approach to this business that only women can provide. And I think that's why you're starting to see a lot more. I think coaches, GMs, front offices, they've caught on to that, and that's where you've seen a lot more women start to fill those roles. And I think it's just going to continue to improve.
So you have, let's say, and I don't know if this has ever happened. I would assume it has because I know it happens to me, and I'm not nearly as unique. But I get emails all the time about how do I do what you do. So if you get an email from a, let's say, 16-year-old girl, how do I do what you do? A 20-year-old girl, how do I do what you do? What is the answer?
I will be the first to admit I had a little bit of luck. I will say my dad's at the Sixers now. I was at the Sixers first, and I got that internship on my own. So there's some roles I had in basketball, but I also knew someone that was able to give me the first opportunity. So I think relationships go a really long way.
Mhm.
And it's not always going to be a family member. It might be, it might be just I meet a lot of younger sisters or media and things at events. And so I'm saying, like, you're already here, you're standing here, and there's probably someone either sitting in the stands, myself, my boss, whatever, that you can then make a connection with that might go a long way. But then also, once you're given the opportunity, take advantage. No one's going to I don't want to, I guess no one's going to outwork me in a lot of ways. That's how I first met Carlton. It was 1 o'clock in the morning and I was up in the office. I was probably finishing rosters or something. I'm kind of obsessive about those things. So I was up late finishing something and he noticed the work that I was putting in. I also completely blew him off because I really had to finish something, and which I think he really respected, because I wasn't there to hang out and just take advantage of the opportunities that are put in front of you. I have certain things that I know on any project and any role with any staff in any conversation I can show up with and I can bring to the table every day. And I think identifying those things and leaning into them and being really clear with what you can provide, and also be solution oriented. Like, I don't believe in the word no. There's a few different mentors I've had in my life that always found a way to get something done. And I think just deciding what you're going to hang your hat on, what in work and life and friendships or whatever are going to be your ownable assets, and really leaning into that and making sure that you're always showing up that way, I guess.
No, that's incredible. It reminds me a couple things. So I obviously work in sports. My brother works in TV, and we have this kind of shared thing of like industries that like yours, industries that everybody kind of daydreams about, and then they recognize, and then they get there and it just becomes like a little too hard, like they're not willing to put in the work. And my brother was he was a personal assistant for a while, and he had a boss, a fairly famous boss, who said first lesson she told him was, there's no such thing as no, like figure it out. So that you tell that story, and it definitely resonates. And I think the other thing too is anybody who is in one of these positions is like, you have to figure it out, and you have to be willing to do more than the next person, because it's just if you don't, there's a long line of people and somebody will do it. Especially and I don't have an appreciation for this, but especially in a case like yours, when there's no path, no one's done it before. You're just, so I chuckled when you said I kind of blew him off, because I was like, I bet that really did, resonate. I bet that was impressive. He's got so many people, I'm sure, trying to connect with him. So this has exceeded my expectations. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now I do have a tendency to geek out at the end of these things. So I got one or two more questions here, because you mentioned, I don't listen to the same music, don't watch a TV show, but I love to ask about what people are reading, what they're watching, whether it's a documentary, TV show, movie, what they're listening to, podcasts, because I think it's like when I turned 40 now, I'm kind of in like this personal growth thing. So is there anything like, is there anything, usually the question is, what are you reading? What would you recommend? But you're free to call an audible in terms of like, hey, this documentary was great, or this podcast I listened to. That's my last question.
So watching, I'm hate watching Your Honor right now. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is a ball of anxiety the entire time. But I'm watching Your Honor. I'm reading, I go back and forth between, I've been reading a lot this year actually, and I'm trying to go back and forth between fiction and nonfiction, because I love a fiction book and I would rather just get lost in a thriller at all times.
Yeah.
But I'm just picked up this morning, actually, Super Forecasting, which Daryl Morey talks about on a podcast. And that's when I ordered it. But it's about building the right teams, and also kind of what motivates people, which I think is really important in a lot of the work that we do. So a lot of reading. I'm sorry.
Super Forecasting?
Yes.
So this is the second part to this. I tend to order the books that people recommend. Like Shaka Smart recommended like this book on meditation, and I ordered it. And at first I was like, and then a few months later I picked it up again. I was like, oh, I'm totally all in. So I'm gonna have to get that one. So that's great stuff. So Rachel, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and for just telling us your story. I really do think it's an inspiring one, not just for a lot of young ladies out there, but for a lot of people who are looking to kind of pave their own path. So can't thank you enough for doing this. And as I said, folks, she is humble to a fault, obviously, but if you see a list of people who are supposedly influential in the world of basketball, the world of grassroots basketball, and she's not on it, It's not a very good list. So thank you again for joining us, everybody. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein. She is Rachel Baker. And until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.